All right, so we're going to go over both resumes and CVs, and then at the end, we will look at something together. And just as something for you to know is that I will look at your CVs in your final reports. Obviously, I'm going to read all of your final reports, and if anything looks wrong, I'll let you know so that that's something you can correct. Hunter, do you have a question?
No, my hand just never went down after I raised it.
Oh, okay. Just making sure. But yeah, if you guys do have questions, obviously feel free to ask. That is not a problem. All right, let's get started. So I know it's Friday and we don't want to be here forever. I will be, at a minimum, we'll be done by 3 for sure. I won't keep you longer than that. But let me share my screen with you. Okay, I'm just gonna share it in the PowerPoint. I feel like whenever I go full screen, it gets weird and wonky. All right, writing resumes and CVs for undergraduates. So first up, resumes, what are they? I think something that's really important to understand is that they are different. Sometimes students think that they are the same. So a resume for you guys as undergraduate students is a 1-page document that is a summation of your work experiences. Now that can be work that you were paid for, work that was part of your education, work that you were volunteering for. There's lots of different work experiences. And sometimes you might also list skill sets, things like this. And we'll go over the different sections of a resume, but it's a short summation. And at your age and at your education level and your experience level, 1 page. People really aren't gonna look beyond 1 page. I am 40 years old, I can have 2 pages. Perhaps when I am 60, I can have 3, I don't know. But for you guys, keep it to 1 page. And I say this, we know that a lot of times employers, when they're looking through applications, they won't even look past the first page. My mother for a very long time was an editor at the local paper here in Baton Rouge, and she told me she never looked beyond the first page. So if you had something really great on that second page, she wasn't even gonna see it. She was like, no, I'm looking for young reporters. I just want to see that first page. So it's something to keep in mind if, when you're applying for those entry-level positions, that's what you want, is that 1 page. And I'm repeating myself because I think this is important, because I know that I have seen multi-page resumes. Now, how do employers review them? Quickly and ruthlessly. They are looking very, very quickly through these things. They're typically receiving many resumes, many applications, whether it's, they're looking through them for scholarship applications, grad school applications, employment applications, whatever the situation might be, they're looking at a lot of them. So you want to make it easy to read. I know sometimes because you're limited to this 1 page, you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna make the print tiny and cram in as much information as possible. I wouldn't. You want to make it something that's easy to read, that's very easy to follow. Obviously you can use lots of different templates and formats and things that look nice, and that's totally fine. If you're not in graphic design or something that has sort of a design sensibility, an area in which design is important, you probably want to stick to something fairly basic. If you are in design, if you're in architecture or something like that, landscape, you can get really kind of like cool and funky with vertical and horizontal, fonts and all this other kind of stuff. But for almost everyone in this Zoom meeting, you really just want like a classic format of your resume. And this also applies to your CV as well, but we'll talk about the CV after we talk about resumes. So what to write on a resume. So we're going to kind of go through this next, but sorry, I'm like skipping through my own PowerPoint here too quickly. So what is a resume? It's not an exercise in torture. It does feel like an exercise in torture, but it is not. And we already talked about the purpose. So the purpose is a summation of your work experience. Now, something to keep in mind too is that you can, and I think I might be jumping ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and say this. This is why I'm terrible with PowerPoints and I just like to talk. I always recommend that you do what I do with resumes. So I have essentially 2 resumes and I have a CV. So I have a resume that is every single thing I've ever done. All of my education, every single job, even back to high school, which was a very long time ago, every volunteer, everything. And I call it my master resume. So I keep a copy of that, you know, in my Google Drive. It's my master resume. It's long. It's pages and pages long because it's everything. Because at a certain point, you're going to forget what you've done. Now, that might seem kind of crazy now because everything is so meaningful and amazing in college, but you're going to get to 40 years old and you're going to be like, wait, I know that I was an RA in college, but I don't remember which years I was, like, I don't, like, there's literally years where I don't remember. Like, I know that I worked certain jobs in college and I know I did certain things during summers, but I couldn't tell you the years just off the top of my head. So you want to keep this big, long, and you can call it whatever you want. I call mine the master resume. And to put everything in there and to update it at a minimum yearly, but probably for you guys, maybe even semesterly. Because imagine sometimes things change very quickly semester to semester for you as you're gaining new experiences and different things are happening. So you want to keep it all in there so that you don't forget. And then whenever I'm applying to a job, which don't worry, I'm not applying to any jobs. I'm with LSU now 13 years and I'm staying put. But when in the past, when I've applied to jobs, I'll take that master resume and then I whittle it down to all the relevant experiences. So if I'm applying to, so if I were applying to my current position here at LSU, I would only really keep in all of my job experiences and skill sets that relate to higher education and to working with college students. That would be my case, right? And so that's something to keep in mind that you would, and it's totally fine to leave things out. And people might see like, oh, you know, if you have like some missing timeframes in there and they ask you in the job interview, you can say, oh, you know, I didn't really have room to put in there, but yeah, I also, even though I'm applying to this civil engineering position, I worked at a zoo one summer or something like that. You know, I didn't think it was really relevant to this position, however. So again, that's something I think maybe sometimes you don't quite get is that you can edit your resume to be as relevant as possible. Okay. So you can leave things off, essentially. All right, so what are the things to put on there? Now, honestly, you guys, you can Google this. I feel like this is pretty straightforward kind of stuff. Just Google resume templates, resume examples, and follow them. I've essentially taken, these are all screenshots from the Olin Career Center. So you can also go to the Olin Career Center and look up their stuff. I don't want to go through this too much because I think you guys are all really smart and you can figure this kind of stuff out and follow a template along pretty well on your own. A couple of just like pointers that I do want to point out is right here where you see it says your email, and I put in there nothingweird@gmail.com. Seriously, guys, if your Gmail is like hotmama xxx, like don't like, or if it's just something that even like, I think sometimes too there's like a language barrier between the old people like me and the young people like you, where you might have something in there that's sort of like a fun, cute joke, but like somebody in their 50s is going to just be like, what is this nonsense? You just want it to be your name. And if your name is very common, it can be your name, you know, with a series of numbers or something like that, or, you know, your full name. So my husband has a very common name, Eric White. So his Gmail is his full with his middle name in there. So I always recommend just something really basic. Don't put your LSU email address because 6 months after you graduate, you will no longer have access to your LSU email address. And you don't want to submit a resume somewhere because what will happen is when you submit resumes, people will keep them. And if like the person they hire, they take on like several months down the line quits and they're like, oh, but you know what? Ginger White was really awesome in her interview. Let's try and contact her again. Yeah. And then like we want to contact you, but then the email address you've given us has expired. So put in a personal permanent. And whenever we talk about permanent emails, we mean one that you can take beyond your time here at LSU in a resume and a CV. Okay, and then optional, you can put in a LinkedIn LinkedIn profile, you know, or if you have like a website. I know some of you are in CXC, so you're probably building like online profiles, and that's fine. You can put that on your resume as well. But depending on the space and considerations like that, you may or may not want to do that. And then there's a little example of how to put it. Like I said, just Google these things and you can figure that out. Okay, educational background, you want to make sure that you put this in reverse chronological order. For now, so one of the things that I kind of notice on some students' resumes and CVs is that you have your graduation date, which is in the future, but you want to say anticipated graduation date for now. And then you want to have your current GPA for now. And then after you graduate, obviously, then you just take out those words because then it's understood that you have earned your BS or your BA, your bachelor's degree. You can also add in things like relevant coursework. Again, these are all going to depend on how, like what you're applying to and how much space you have in that one page limit. Okay, I also have a little note here that once you've graduated from college, you don't necessarily have to list your high school diploma anymore. For now, you want to because you don't have a college degree yet, so your only certified education you have currently is your high school diploma. But once you graduate from college, you can leave your high school degree off if you like. Sometimes people like to leave it on there because it kind of shows like where you grew up, and maybe that's of interest to where you're applying. People can see you're a local or something like that. All right. I'm going to keep just kind of blasting through these, but you know, if you have a question, just unmute yourself and shout out. Okay, experience. So sometimes what can happen is you don't have a ton of experience. So I've been talking about cramming lots of things into one page, but some of you might have the issue where you're like, I've only really done one thing, and so my resume is like really short. That's fine. You are young, and it's totally fine if literally the only thing you have to put on there is your research experience. Now, obviously, we would hope that you've done maybe some extracurriculars, some volunteer work, some other things, because those are the types of things that you can add onto your resume to show that you do have other experiences, even if they aren't necessarily working in a lab or work related. So make sure that, you know, you put things on there. Again, I'm going to just kind of keep going through these. I think some of this is obvious, but if not, just again, unmute yourself and ask. Here's just a little example again. Copied this from Olin Career Center, which you can go and check out yourselves. Just looking at how you might want to organize the data. So for example, if you don't have a lot of work experience and you just want to combine your work and volunteer experience together, the header could just be called experience. And then you list there things for which you were paid for and maybe things that were volunteer experiences. And you kind of see that mixture here, right? So we have an internship, vice president of recruitment for Panhellenic Council, but that's obviously volunteer work. And then we have an assistant manager at a boutique, which is a paid experience. And that internship could be paid or unpaid, you know, it's for course credit. But you can list them all under one heading if you prefer to do it that way. It's also a way to save space too, because obviously the more headers you add into your resume, that takes up more and more space. And this is perfectly fine. And again, it's all just style. No one looking at your resume is going to be like, well, they didn't use the exact headers that I would prefer. Like that's no, no one really like, as long as it's neat, it's organized, it's easy to read, that's what's important. All right, so, or you can obviously, just like I was saying, you can divide them up into different headers, your work experience and leadership involvement separated like this, whatever you like. And also one of the things you probably noticed that I haven't mentioned yet is that under some of these, or under all of these, there have been bullet points about sort of what the major job responsibilities or responsibilities were for each of these positions that were held, whether they were paid or voluntary. You can certainly do that. For those of you who have like a ton of things to cram onto that one page, you might not want to list them at all. And instead you would talk about them in your cover letter or in your personal statement. So you can do it either way. You can add a little bit of detail there, or you can leave that detail out. Again, this is going to be up to you how you want to do this. And again, we're still talking about resumes. So one of the things you're going to notice between my discussion with you about resumes versus CVs, Resume, there's going to be a lot of consideration about space and like what to add and what not to add. CVs, you do not have a limit on the page numbers. So you can add as much detail as you like. And we'll talk again more about that in just a second here. Other sections to consider adding. Obviously, if you have any awards, honors, scholarships, you know, it might not seem like you should add such things, but definitely add that, you know, you have a top scholarship. If you're a Louisiana resident, you have the Louisiana scholarship. You know, any scholarship you got from LSU, even smaller scholarships that maybe you got from that you just applied for, whether they were just like $100 or $500, all that kind of stuff, put that in there. That looks really great. Obviously adding in leadership and activities, any organizations, school organizations that you've been a part of. You can also add in a skills section. So if you know like C++ or how to use AutoCAD or SPSS or whatever the case may be, again, making it relevant to whatever you're applying to. So that's something to keep in mind. If you know any additional languages, so any of you who have any degree of fluency in other languages, that can be very helpful. And then, you know, you can also, if you would like, you could add any of your presentations or publications. Not really necessary on a resume, definitely on a CV, 100% mandatory, but on a resume, you can add those things if you would like. Okay, so the full resume, the master resume, we already discussed that. That's that idea of just having this one resume where you put every single thing you've done so you don't forget these things. And then of course, with the resume, you do need to have that second one or whatever working one that you're going to submit for in your application. It's one page. You can reduce the margins if you need more room, but try not to reduce the font too much. Again, you're submitting these resumes to people like me who are older and wear glasses, and if I have to struggle to read your resume, I'm probably just not going to read it. I know that's mean, but that's kind of how it works when you have 50 resumes in front of you. All right, cover letters versus resumes. Real quick word about cover letters. For those of you who are applying to jobs or internships where they ask for a cover letter, a cover letter is where you really go into a discussion where you connect your own experiences with the job responsibility. So if you're applying, you know, to a specific job and maybe it's not obvious from your resume how your own experiences connect, you can explain that in the cover letter itself. You know, obviously you want to express some enthusiasm for the position and your interest in it, but really you're explaining, you know, hey, in your position, you're asking that someone have supervising experiences and experiences with this sort of whatever it is, software, and I use that software in my position at blah, 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 and this is the type of project that I worked on. And, you know, that's really what you're doing in a cover letter, which is why I was mentioning earlier how underneath those positions, there was a lot of like detail about the major responsibilities of the position and why that's not always necessary, because again, you can discuss that in your cover letter. Okay. And then I have a little note here too. If your resume is short, you can add your references to the end of your resume to make it seem like one nice full page. Otherwise, you can add just a line at the bottom, references available upon request, or leave it off entirely. Most people who are hiring understand how to contact your employers, or what will happen is, you know, let's say you apply to a job and they call you like, oh, we'd really like to interview you. By the way, can you send us email addresses or the phone numbers of, you know, and they'll list for you the employers that they want to contact. And then you can give them that information then. All right. Again, Olin Career Center is great. They also will review your resumes. And so I really recommend taking advantage of them. As research students, I imagine most of you are very interested in applying to graduate schools, and more so with graduate schools, you want to submit a CV, which is obviously why we are focusing on that here at LSU Discover. But at the same time, some of you might want to go directly into the workforce, which is also totally cool. And I really recommend taking advantage of the Olin Career Center. They're great. And they'll even do, I think they'll do like practice interviews with you. They do all kinds of stuff. So make sure to take advantage of those resources. I think you can even use the Olin Career Center after you graduate. I'm pretty sure like they'll still, like once you're an LSU alumni, like you can still use that office. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's okay. Oh wait, any questions about the resume before we start CV stuff? Nope. All right. Great, because I was going to direct those questions to the Olin Career Center. No, I'm joking. All right, a CV. So CV is short for curriculum vitae, which is Latin for basically the course of one's life. This is an academic record. So whereas a resume is a summation of your work experience, a CV is I don't even want to say summation, it's just a listing of all of your academic achievements. Now, there's lots of different ways that you will hear this word. It's called a CV, a vita, a curriculum vitae. This is all the same thing. One of the things I would like for you guys to do right now, since we're all on the computers, is if you haven't already, I would love for you to just very quickly try and find your faculty mentor CV. You should be able to find it on the departmental website. So if you just Google whatever LSU Biological Sciences and look for their name and click on it, you should be able to find a copy of their CV. So let's do that real quick. And once you have it, put like a little emoji thingy up. Now, for some of you, it might be hard to find your faculty member's CV. So if you can't find theirs, you can look for somebody else in your department. I think sometimes the younger faculty are more likely to have their CV posted online. And while you guys are looking for your own faculty mentor CV, I'm going to pull up somebody's CV on the screen share. Has anybody been able to find their faculty mentor's CV yet? Okay. So I think, so who was able to find it? You? Kennedy? Okay, Kennedy, I'm going to give you the ability to share your screen. Can you share your screen with us and show us your mentor's CV, please? It's okay if you couldn't find your mentor CV. Sometimes they don't post them online. Sometimes they'll just have like a short summary of like some of their publications or some of their presentations. So that's okay. All right, so we are looking at Dr. Katie Cherry's CV from psychology. She has a little note here when it was last revised. So this is something you're going to notice if you're looking up your faculty and mentors CV. Sometimes it's been a while since they've been revised. So that's 2 years out of date. Undoubtedly, Dr. Cherry has done a lot of things in the last 2 years that she could add here. And probably in her own personal, like on her computer, she has a very updated saved version of her CV. She just hasn't updated the public, this one, which is fine. So first, it looks very similar to a resume. That's what we noticed, right? It looks very, and this is a very simple layout, which you are all welcome to do a very simple layout if that's what you want to do. So Kennedy, let's slowly start scrolling through. So we see education, and then we see a first section here is professional experience. She's been a professor, an executive director, you know, a professor since 1996. Most of you probably weren't even born in 1996. You know, Dr. Cherry's got a lot of experience. And then she has, we'll keep going. So areas of interest, and this is something to notice, areas of interest, or, you know, sometimes this might be called like research interest or something like that. Just a brief summary of, you know, her particular research interest, what she's looking into. And this is something that you can add into your own CVs as well, if there's something that you are particularly interested in. If you don't know what you're interested in yet, you're like, well, I've done research on frogs for the last few years, but I actually don't care about frogs anymore. I'm looking for something else. You can leave that off. You don't have to say like, oh yeah, frogs forever. Like, don't worry about that. But it is something that, you know, for those of you who definitely have something in mind, particularly if you're applying to graduate schools, you could add something like that here. Let's keep going. All right, professional organizations. Now, some of you might be student members of professional organizations in your discipline. You can absolutely add that here. Or if there's a student organization on campus. So if, you know, there's the student organization for psychology majors or whatever it's called, or, you know, the honors biology society, or, you know, I'm not remembering any of the names of student organizations currently, but you guys know what I'm saying. You can add those there. Next, she has national and regional offices and committee memberships. This is very specific to more experienced faculty, not necessarily something that you guys would really have. But again, one of the things you're probably noticing is that she's listing absolutely everything, right? And there's a lot of detail here too. So it's not just, oh, I was in this behavioral and social sciences section committee. She's saying she was in the committee, she was a member, the year she was a member, and the name of the parent organization of that committee, which is the Gerontological Society of America. So this is something I want you guys to keep in mind too, because this is a mistake that I see on a lot of student CVs, is you don't put in enough detail about the things that you've done, whether it's, you know, committee memberships, which might not necessarily be for your case, but things like publications, participation in certain events or in certain organizations. You need to make sure to be detailed. Okay, so let's keep scrolling down. Kennedy might have frozen. Oh, there. Oh, one more thing before Kennedy starts scrolling. One of the things you're going to notice at the top of the screen there, how many pages long is this CV? It's 20 pages long. right? Which is something we would expect from a professor who's been working since 1996. We expect lots and lots of pages. Now, for you guys, for undergraduates, 2 pages is probably what you're going to see for yours, like 1 or 2 pages. And there's nothing, even if it's just 1 page, that's nothing to be ashamed about. But typically 1 to 2 pages is what an undergraduate researcher CV, the link would be for an undergraduate research CV. Obviously, if you guys decide to pursue research as a career, as the years go by, your CV may also get up to 20. I've seen CVs that have, like, for much older faculty that are 30, 40 pages long. Because again, they put everything in here. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is they have to put everything in there. That is required, like LSU requires that they put everything in there as well. So just in case you're thinking like, wow, this is kind of crazy level of detail, it is what academia, what universities expect. They want to see this detail. Okay, so Kennedy, let's keep scrolling down through Dr. Terry's CV. We're not going to go through all 20 pages, don't worry. We're just kind of checking things out. So she's talking about things she's done specifically at LSU, which is where she's currently employed. Let's see if we can find her publications. Let's see. Oh, she's got her grants. So she's got a section just on her funding. So those of you who've been funded by LSU Discover, you too can have a grants section where you would write that you've been funded, right? And there's her publications. And she's only doing since 2009 out of 165 total. So she's like, I don't want to put all this in here. Just, you know, it's the kind of thing where, like, if you want from before that date, then she'll give you something else. But again, you're seeing that her publications, and I'm sure if we scroll down to her presentations, that they're fully cited. And again, I want to show you guys this so that you understand, because this is a mistake I see over and over again in student CVs. You need to fully cite yourself. Don't just say that you presented at LSU Discover Day in 2021. Like, what is that? Like, you need to say you presented, you know, you, and if you had a co-presenter, you absolutely must list them as well. You know, put the year, put the date. You need to put Louisiana State University as the location. You need to put the title of the poster or the presentation. If you won an award at Discover Day, you should list that under your awards and honors that you placed at Discover Day. Or if you won any other award. Sometimes you guys have the really good fortune to present at a national conference, and sometimes those national conferences also give students awards for, like, the top poster presenters. Also, you would want to list those types of things. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kennedy, for sharing. So you can stop sharing, and then we will get into a bit more detail as we go back. Are there, oh, somebody's in chat. Oops, I'm sorry, Rachel, I totally didn't see this question. What do you put for your high school diploma if you were homeschooled? I believe if you're homeschooled, you have like a, don't you have like a certification of like homeschool? There's something that's like, something like that, right, Rachel? There's probably like a board or something that certifies that you received a homeschooled education. Rachel might have checked out. Well, anyway, that would be the answer. I would say, you know, yes, that's correct. Yeah, so I would just cite that. I would just say, you know, you could say homeschooled, comma, and whatever, like whatever organization certified your homeschool education, you can say, you know, and I don't know the exact wording, but it might be something like diploma granted by American Homeschools Organization or something like that. And then the year. But that's a good question. Okay, let's go back to our beautiful, beautiful PowerPoint. All right, so CVs versus resumes. Again, the purpose of a CV is different than the purpose of a resume. A resume is just something very quick for somebody to look at and see your work experience. A CV is usually you're submitting a CV to an academic, like a university or an academic organization, maybe one that's giving out grants or scholarships or something like this. And they really do want to see a lot of information. Now, whenever you go to apply to something, if they specifically ask only for a resume, just submit the resume. But if they say resume or CV, I recommend you opt for the CV, because then you can put a lot more about yourself out there. But if they're only asking for a resume, don't put your CV in instead. Stick to whatever it is that they're asking for. And you could even say, at the bottom of your resume, that you have a CV available by request as well. If you think like, hey, a resume doesn't show like how awesome I am, but I've got the CV as well. Okay, CV is going to be very detailed, and it's going to be only academic things. So I think this is another thing that trips up a lot. I know that this trips up a lot of our distinguished researcher students when they submit their CVs in their final portfolio. They put in a lot of things that are not academic. It's kind of it can be kind of subjective, some of the activities that you've done, if you want to put them on your CV. So sometimes students have argued for putting things like, well, I volunteered with Dance Marathon. And I'm like, well, you're a civil engineering major, so I don't know that matters. Like that's a great thing to put on a resume to show that like you do volunteer work and that, but I don't know that anybody who's looking for civil engineering majors cares that you were a Dance Marathon volunteer. They might care if you were part of the civil engineering student organization and you were the treasurer for that. Like that is something that you want to put on a CV. Now, at the same time, we've also had students who are in majors or in disciplines where sometimes, so example, like if you're an education major and you volunteered with like a local school or some sort of thing that involved kids, and you're like, well, I know it's just kind of like, it's like small volunteer opportunity, but it was with children. And I'm trying to pursue a career path working with children. And then I would say, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Even though the activity itself might have been like, playing with kids on a playground or something like that, even though it doesn't seem academic, it is related to what they're trying to pursue. So that's something to keep in mind with your CV. Just be judicious in how you're choosing those activities. For a lot of you in STEM, you might have done really cool, fun things at LSU that have nothing to do with STEM, and they might look a little silly on a CV. A CV is going to be kind of more serious. Not that a resume isn't serious, but it's more academic. It's just the way to put it. It's academic activities. And you can make the argument for certain things being academic or not, but just as an example, some of the things that I've seen on CVs that I've asked students to take off are things like, you work for your parents' lawn mowing company over the summer. You volunteered with the local police station over the summer, you babysat, and usually I ask them to take them off because I don't see the relation with all the other academics on the CV. Like, it just seems like you're padding the CV for no reason with things that it makes it seem like you don't understand what a CV is when you do things like that. Okay. All right, so when do students need a CV? I mean, you'll know you'll need it because they will ask for it. But we want you to have one because we want you guys to be prepared for when you're asked for it, that you will already have it in hand. So a lot of times when you're applying to graduate schools, again, like I mentioned before, they might ask for a CV or a resume. We recommend submitting the CV. Sometimes when you're applying for funding, and then certain just research positions. Maybe some of you are going to apply to be like a research assistant after graduation or something like that, work as a lab, like work in a lab or something like that. There's all sorts of situations where they might ask for a CV, or again, they might just ask for either. And for you guys, it will look stronger when you can submit that CV, because then you can list all of the things that you've done academically. All right. Sorry about that. Okay, so again, just like with the resumes, you can Google CV template and see all the different sections that you need to add. This isn't really like me trying to explain to you how to Google things. I'm just trying to give you sort of like some of the unspoken rules, I think, around CVs. So obviously go Google them. You know, if you can find your faculty mentor CV, that might be a good one to use as a guide. But you can also just Google undergraduate research CVs, and there's plenty of examples out there. And in fact, we've linked some if you're in the Distinguished Researcher program already in the Moodle under the portfolio section where we have the instructions for the CVs. There's links to examples, and I'll do a follow-up email with everyone who attended the workshop today to share those links with you guys. But you can also just Google them yourselves. But obviously there's some things that you absolutely have to put in a CV: your name, your contact information, obviously no weird emails, just like we said earlier, your education, just like on a resume, in reverse chronological order. You do need to put references. Now let's talk very briefly about references. You need to ask people before you list them as your reference. Don't just think to yourself, well, like, well, I know Dr. White loves me and I made an A in her class and like we're totally buddies and she totally thinks I'm amazing and I know she'd be a great reference. You still need to ask. That is the professional, polite thing to do. You don't want to put down someone's name and then, you know, they get a phone call or an email from a potential employer or graduate program, and they're just like, they didn't even ask if I would be their reference. Ask. Now, who do you ask? Obviously, your faculty mentors. That's a pretty obvious one. You know, faculty in general are going to be your strongest ones. I have on occasion had students ask me to be their reference, and let me say this. I will say yes as a last resort. I think it is so much stronger on your CV to list people who are faculty or who are like professional researchers. I'm a staff member at LSU and I appreciate being asked, and that's amazing. You guys are super sweet. But I always make it very clear that while I know you very well, oftentimes as student researchers, and I know a lot about you, maybe sometimes I know more about you than even your faculty mentors do, they look more credentialed than I do on a CV. That's just the truth of the matter. Because I know some of you are like, well, I'm in ambassadors and I'm in DERP and I have a research grant and I've, you know, presented Discover Day a million times. And like, I literally have seen Sarah, like, you know, every single semester that I've been at LSU, like, and I know you very well, and that's great. And I'm, again, if you really, really, truly can't find any other faculty, I'm willing to be one of your references, but I really, really encourage you to find faculty. Now, for those of you who had the good fortune to do research maybe over the summer with another university or like an internship, you can ask those people as well to be a reference, even if you're like, well, I only worked with them for like one summer or one semester. That's okay. They'll know you very well as well, and you can ask them. Ginger, you have your hand up.
I was gonna say, because you talk about how just the idea of knowing someone, would that make sense to then put like say personal references on the resume and keep the academic references on like the CV?
Yeah, so a resume, I'm glad you asked that. Good question, Ginger. Yeah, so a resume, your references can be a mixture. It can be like a past boss. It can be, you know, maybe the academic advisor for whatever student organization you're in. It could maybe be, you know, someone who knows you. It could be me, you know, like that's where exactly, Ginger, that's where it makes sense to have, I would be more of a personal reference than an academic reference. That's really good job, Ginger. That's very astute. So that's a good point. I'm definitely somebody, you know, you could, but again, even with resumes, you still want to ask, you know, especially if it's somebody who, you know, let's say that you list somebody that you had a job with a couple of summers ago on your resume and you don't realize that they've moved on from that place and you don't have like their current contact information. So then your reference is out of date, right? Like that person doesn't work in there anymore. You don't know them personally well enough to like actually have like their real email address or their home phone number or anything like that. So again, you want your references to be current. And they need to have agreed to be your reference. And this isn't, asking somebody to be a reference isn't the same as asking for a letter of recommendation. Right, so a letter of recommendation, you need to ask for that like a month, 6 weeks in advance. Give that faculty member plenty of time to write you a letter of recommendation. Asking if you can list somebody on your reference, like, you know, that's just a yes or no question. You can ask that in person. It doesn't even have to be like a formal email. You can, you know, just tomorrow or Monday when you guys go back in the lab, you can just ask your faculty mentor. All right, so other people you could also, if there are postdocs in your lab, again, people with like PhD after their name, that would be appropriate as well. Depending on the doctoral students, sometimes if that, again, I would say like maybe, but again, try and find faculty to list. Sometimes you can do more than 3. So maybe you have like 3 faculty, but you're like, man, I work so closely with this one doctoral student from almost my entire undergraduate research career. I really want to list them because I think they know me the best. Then I would have them like as the 4th or 5th person, if that makes sense. Like you still want them in there because you're like, that person really knows me. But you still have a solid base of faculty in your list. Okay, any other questions about references? Oh wait, there's a chat. Let's see, Hayden has asked, would working as a tutor count as academic since we likely work as TAs during grad school? Yes, yes, Hayden, good question. So if you have worked as a tutor or a supplemental instructor or who knows what else you want to call these different things, you can actually list that under teaching experience. For sure. And that does look good. That's a great question. All right, so we have some, and in fact, speaking of, under recommended sections, there it is, teaching experiences. All right, so here's some recommended sections. Again, you don't have to have all of these. These are just ones to consider. So obviously that research interest statement, we saw that on Dr. Cherry's CV when Kennedy shared her screen, remember? I recommend having one if you do already know what you want to do. And let me say this, that your application to graduate school will be stronger if you kind of know what you want to do in graduate school. You don't have to know precisely, you don't have to have like methodologies like planned out, you know, but to know like, okay, for example, when I was an undergraduate student, I applied, so I have a master's degree in Roman archaeology. And when I applied, in my personal statement, in my research interest, I explained what specifically I was interested in studying as a graduate student in Roman archaeology. Right? I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know the exact details, but I knew I already wrote an undergraduate thesis on XYZ. It really like made me super interested in, essentially it was like, I don't want to go into all of it, but it was Pompeii. And so I was like, and I would like to keep exploring this particular idea in Roman cities and the idea of Roman cities, essentially. So it was very broad and general. And then I also said, you know, and you don't have to put this in your CV, but just as a side note, and I also said, and I would really love to work with Dr. David Stone, as I know that he is an expert in this area. So, right, like making sure like that graduate school understands like you have an interest in something that they actually teach and that their researchers are actually doing. Okay, anyway, so back on to recommended sections. If you have an undergraduate thesis, an honors thesis or a departmental thesis, obviously put that in there, you know, put the full title of your thesis. You can put the name of your thesis chair or your committee members. Put all that in there. Research experiences, absolutely. All the research you've done. By the way, when you list out your research experiences, you need to say, if the lab has a name, you can name the lab, or you can say that you worked with Dr. So-and-so. List the faculty member name, list their full name. Don't just say like, you know, Dr. last name, have the full name. And just like we saw on those resumes where each position had just a bullet point of major responsibilities, you absolutely want to do that on your CV. And you can say what your responsibilities were. You can have a brief summation of what the project was in that lab. So, you know, if it's Dr. Emily Elliott's memory lab, you might want to just have like a 1-sentence statement on specifically what about memory she studies. And then you can have a bullet point of what your responsibilities were in that lab or on that project. And include everything. So any kind of research experience, as you know, some of you have maybe done like $39.99 like research courses, you know, you can list those. I know for some of you, like you'll work on the same project and it'll kind of go in and out. Like one semester you're working on that project for course credit, the next semester you're getting paid, and the next semester you apply for LSU Discover grant, the next semester you're volunteering. That's fine. You don't have to separate that out like that. Just the work with that one professor on that one project is how you'll list that. All right, any relevant coursework? Absolutely, methodology courses, things like that that are, it should be pretty obvious to anyone in your field why you're listing those courses. Sometimes they'll want to see that you've taken those courses, right? Like it looks really solid. But sometimes it might be courses that, you know, you are listing them to show like this actually, taking this course benefited my research and my academics in this area. Teaching experiences, again, if you tutored or if you were a supplemental instructor, absolutely list it there. Publications. Again, I want to keep emphasizing you need to fully cite any publications you have. If you have a publication that is currently in press or has been submitted, you need to make sure you indicate that. Because you don't want to put in a publication that hasn't been published yet and then have someone go look for it and they can't find it. But if it's been submitted or if it's currently in press, meaning like it's about to be published, then just in brackets, you would just say that somewhere in the citation of it. Presentations, again, fully cite your presentations, full titles, all co-authors, all co-presenters, things like that. Scholarships awarded, again, like I mentioned before, list all your scholarships. Grants and fellowships, list your LSU Discover grants, list any other grants you may have received as well. Professional associations, licenses, certification, honors, awards, etc. I mean, all the things you've done. You could even list like your CITI certification. Some of you have had to take specific certifications like lab safety or like to use certain equipment or something like that. List all of that kind of stuff. You can list your link, a link to if you have like an online portfolio or LinkedIn, that's totally fine. If you've studied abroad, I would absolutely list that as well. And then, you know, any other specialized skills training that you've done that's related to your discipline, you will want to list. So we kind of mentioned that with the resume that there can be like a skills section, and that can be anything from your fluency in languages to, you know how to use like certain software or certain equipment or something like that, you know, that you've been trained and you know how to use it. Okay. I know we have like 3 minutes here, but I'll send you the links to these things. So these are just other faculty CVs. I wanted us to look at one of y'all's faculty member CVs, which is why we did that thing at the beginning. So we won't look at these. But you know, if you want to write down their names, you can Google these and find these. So I know these are all faculty who have mentored LSU Discover students, and the very last one is actually the director of LSU Discover. But they're all long and good ones to check out. Okay, just a very quick look at examples, and I'm going to send you these links again, so don't worry about trying to write down all that craziness. I will send you these links of examples of undergraduate CVs. Very simple layout. You know, if you got fancy ways you want to lay these out, go for it. Just make sure it's very easy to read. Oops, sorry. So just one of the things I do want to point out, this is just a 1-page CV, and yet it's still very impressive, right? It's just a 1-page CV, but it still looks really great. They've got research appointments, they have scholarships, they have a research interest listed here, and they've listed their anticipated graduation date, and that's great. And their email isn't weird. So we are now, and so it's time to take a survey. You guys aren't going to take a survey, but I will take any questions that we have in this very last minute. I see we have, let me stop sharing. We have some in the chat. All right, so Ginger's asking, should relevant coursework be listed on its own or as bullet points under where the course was taken? I don't know that I understand your question, Ginger. Do you mean like under,
So-
oh, go ahead.
You know, because it's something where like I was dual enrollment in high school and I took like abnormal psych in high school. So I'm like I would list it under like the community college or taking 4101 in stats and listing that under LSU. Or
Okay.
is it something where you just as a separate thing be like I've taken these stats classes or I've taken
Separate
this
thing.
research class?
So you would just title a new section heading called relevant coursework.
Okay.
And then you would list the courses and you would list where you took them. So you would say whatever at Louisiana State University, whatever at the RCC or wherever you took the courses or the dual enrollment or whatever it happened. But you can just have just a section itself on just relevant coursework.
Okay. And then individual courses, or would it be helpful to break it up into like math classes, psych stats classes, or just kind of individual?
I think that's like a personal choice. You can do it either way. You can either like divide them by discipline if you want to, or you could list them like chronologically, like reverse chronologically. It kind of depends on your personal preference. I don't really see that there's like
Okay.
an argument for either. Okay. And Kennedy's asking if we are in the Engaged Citizen program, could that be added as an experience? Yes. So Engaged Citizen is service learning, but it is learning, it is academic. So I think that CXC, Communication Across the Curriculum, and Engaged Citizen are definitely two programs that if you were involved in them, you might need to like write a little sentence about what it is, because one of the things you have to realize is whenever you submit your resume or CV, oftentimes you're going to submit it to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about. So if you just put on there like LSU Engaged Citizen 2021, that means nothing to anyone outside of LSU. It barely means anything to, like, you know, most people at LSU don't even know that LSU Discover exists, right? So like you want to make sure that you write out like LSU Engaged Citizen awardee, service learning program, or just something like that. So it's more obvious what it is. And again, I want to keep going back to this idea of making sure that you put in enough detail on all of these things so that somebody who has nothing to do with LSU, nothing to do with you, can understand what it is you're putting in there. But yeah, absolutely, you can add that. Any other questions? I know we're going over, I'm sorry. Okay. Well, guys, like I said, I'll go get all these links together and shoot them to you in an email right after this, so that way you have them. And you know, if you have follow-up questions later, you have my email address. Just email me, and then obviously I will see all your CVs soon anyway. All right. Good luck in getting your CVs together, and have a great weekend. And I will, you know, just check your email. We're going to be emailing you guys probably a lot in the next week. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.